Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of GC Talks by BW Legal World. Our program, GC Talks, aims at bringing you insights from in-house legal departments of various organizations and the people helming these departments as the guardians of the law. I'm Ashrama Ore along with Costa Mehta, and we are here today with our august guest, Ms. Manjari Chaudhary, Senior Executive Director and General Counsel, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. Manjari, thank you for joining us on GC Talks. So wonderful to see you again. You've been on this show before in the pandemic times. A lot has changed since then, and we are so looking forward to getting to know more on that today.
Thank you, Ashima, and thank you, Kaustav. I think it's wonderful to be back and having this conversation with you, which is always very exciting, energizing, and great, something that I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Manjari. So before I get to some of my other questions, let me begin by saying how good is that Maruti Suzuki uniform? And I hope our viewers are taking note of it. And let's just know a little more. I'm intrigued. Is that the regular outfit to the office for everyone in the organization?
Yes, and the history is as old as Maruti. And by the way, we celebrate our 40th anniversary of being set up as Maruti Suzuki and the partnership of Suzuki with the people of India. And we're very proud of this uniform because when it was started, the company, it was thought that there has to be a connecting factor. And you'd see it in most auto companies. It's quite standard, but Maruti really takes it to the next level, right from our youngest worker on the shop floor to the CEO. Everybody wears the same uniform, made out of the same cloth, coming from the same vendor. So there is no hierarchy in that at all. It is such a connecting factor that we all look alike. So there is, many of it's such a level playing field, let me say. I mean, it just creates a level playing field to start with. And that's the way we always have been. So yes, it's a regular dress. And so I really don't. The good side about it is also, besides other things of connecting and creating this one team feeling in Maruti, that we're all Maruti Suzuki and we all wear it with an extreme sense of pride. And besides that, it also takes away the burden of worrying what you have to wear each morning. So it's very standard and easy to do.
That's great, and what a beautiful fiber to run across the organization, so great connecting factor, as you said, great thought, good on the company. And Manjari, so, let's rewind a bit and come to the point where you were an English professor, you came into law, it's been 20 plus years since then. How has this journey been, and what would you call your biggest strength as a lawyer?
Oh, it has been quite a journey, I would say. And, the word quite a journey has a huge amount of meaning attached to it, because it's been, yes, it was not easy. It was one of the first risks I took in my life to move from a very settled career of 7 years as a professor to, getting into law, where I had to start from scratch, and then suddenly realize that I was also 7 years behind my peers, because they were ahead of me. So a lot of catching up to do, a lot of hard work. There was no easy way. There was nothing called placements those days. You just got fixed up wherever you could find a place for yourself, and you just made your way up. And it was always by a sheer sense of, I think, determination, perseverance, hard work, and attitude that no, this is where I am and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make a go of it. I think that was something that stood me in good stead always. And I started off as a litigator, then moved into in a law firm practice for about close to 4 years, and then moved into General Electric and spent over 17 years with them in General Electric. And then the other company I know is Maruti Suzuki. So in all of them, the common factor has always been a willingness to always improve, a willingness to learn, a willingness to work real hard. I believe that, you shouldn't sit back and have regrets. It's better to have fought and lost than not to have fought at all, So that's always been the mantra. Also, it's also a huge sense of adaptability that you need to bring. I think one of the strengths, if I may say so, if I were to say I had, was this huge sense of adaptability to be able to fit into surroundings and cultures and environments. Every company, every environment, law firm, companies, litigation, wherever you go, has a different, it's a fabric is different, the feel is different, people are different. I think once you adapt to it, or you have an appreciation of the differences, I think that helps you to fit in faster. And also the attitude of wanting to make a go of any assignment or any role that you have taken up. And I think also progressively, I always would challenge myself to take on some tough assignments, so it was never always very easy. There was always some element which was disturbing about that particular role. But then I always tell myself that if I look back, I can think that I think my biggest learnings have been when I have faced more adversity in terms of the environment, which could have been tough, or a transaction which was tough, or the people which were tough. It could be in any form. But I think you always learn, because necessity is also the mother of invention, and you learn to course correct, and you learn to rethink and reinvent, re-strategize, and try and work your way through. So I think that has been a real mainstay in my career. To successfully, how will you contribute if you do not fit into an environment? You need to become a part of that first, and get accepted in the milieu. Only then you can start contributing. Only then can you understand the business. So I think it's very important to be able to do that. And then always, what I've been is more of a commercial counsel, so I've always liked the idea of being a part of a business. If the business does well, you get a kick out of it, that you in some way contributed towards that. I like to, the whole environment of working in a business is so different from that of a law firm. But quite soon I realized that I enjoyed working on this side of the table, and I have been ever since. So I think wearing the commercial hat and trying to be very integral to your stakeholders, to your commercial stakeholders, to understand their problems, to sort it out in a manner which can make them, feel good about the transaction, and you build your credibility in the process. Eventually, what is the new age GC about? He or she is about being a trusted and a credible partner to the business. And all of these things are so important to build that level of credibility and trust, and to be able to ensure that the business moves forward, but yes, in the right way. So your task is that much more tough and difficult, because you really need to find those right solutions. And most often one does, sometimes one doesn't. And then how do you state yourself when one doesn't? That is also extremely material. So I think that has been basically my journey. And now with Maruti Suzuki, of course, brought its own challenges in terms of a different culture, a different environment, way of working, all of those. But I think I am in my 5th year with them and running, I think. So I must say the company has accepted me, and I have accepted them. So somewhere it's been a good, sort of synergy. And that has enabled me to bring about some, make some contributions, which if I might say, I think have added value to the organization in different ways. So that's what it is.
Absolutely. Wishing you many, many more years ahead. And thank you so much for sharing that journey with us, Manjari. Now, shifting the gears to 2 very important topics these days, that are ESG and data privacy. Starting with ESG, environmental, social governance, is a movement that, simply put, keeps people, planet, and profits at the center of business operations. Now, what would you say are some of the environmental challenges unique to the auto companies today amidst spills, waste, pollution, climate change, and other environmental concerns?
A very good question, Ashima. And certainly, I think we are in a world which is dramatically changing and becoming very, very environment sensitive, across the globe. The pandemic really showed it to us as to how much of, uh, how badly we handle the environment, and therefore what has been the outcomes of that across the globe. And our prime minister, we all understand COP26. He was at that convention in Paris in last year, and part of the United Nations convention, where he actually talked about the 5 pillars that he wishes to bring into, has made commitments towards environment and carbon neutrality going forward, and renewable energy going forward, and nationally determined contributions that have evolved. And most recently, they have the Parliament actually spoke about those contributions. So I think in keeping with all of that, India also has evolved in terms of environmental regulations. And in the auto sector, they are, of course, they keep coming all the time. So given the fact that we make automobiles, so therefore emissions is always an issue. Also, when we set up factories as OEMs, what do we do in the factories? What kind of waste management, plastic waste, effluent waste? Of course, I consider that as a smaller part of it. Renewable energy, getting into solar, and then movement into the emission side of the world. That can you reduce your carbon emissions? What kind of green fuels can you move to non-fossil fuels? And many different steps in those directions. The CAFE norms, which the government brings about, and the BS standards, the Bharat standards for emissions, which were right from BS4. We moved suddenly the leapfrog to BS6. The government wanted that, and they became effective 1st of April of last year. Now, Maruti is a very compliant company, and we ensure that we continue to be remaining very, very compliant. We work with the government. We try and explain to them certain issues that can be of concern. But when it comes to meeting the regulations, we always do. So we are BS6 compliant. All our vehicles are. But then again, when you do that, one of the challenges that always remains in all of this is that the costs always go up. There is a direct correlation to that. Better technologies, better fuel, you have to tweak your engines. You've got to look at different, engineering, and the R&D expenditure on that becomes much more. So the cost certainly goes up, and that always is a factor that we need to keep in mind, because we are a company that is that the brand is associated with the common man, and we believe in volume so that we can reduce costs and make it the car an affordable aspiration for all the people in this country, and especially the ones at the lower rung of the startup of society, who are aspiring from two-wheelers to get into four-wheelers. So that challenge and that balancing act we continue to make. But certainly around environment, we have done a lot of work, like you mentioned about the ESG piece. I think not only meeting all the regulatory norms, we are now getting into compressed biogas. We've just recently signed up a MOU with the National Dairy Development Corporation to set up 2 pilot projects of biogas, to see how it is going to work. And if it all goes well, we have plans of expanding it. We are now into electric vehicles. We do plan to get out. We've already made those announcements by about 2025. Setting up of battery plants. We sort of avail of the PLI scheme of the government, where government gives incentive towards these things. But EV is again nothing but green technology, right? So we are moving into very environment friendly kind of technologies, new technologies, ensuring our cars not only remain the best, but also bring with them environment-friendly technologies and green technologies. So I think there is a lot of work that's going on in that direction as a company. But yes, the challenge always remains.
Right. That's wonderful to hear that we're moving to green EV modules now, and hopefully things would look better in the future. But if we could understand from you, what is the classic playbook for ESG metrics at auto companies or even at Maruti Suzuki?
I think ESG is the buzzword and has been for over a year now. And it was always there earlier also. SEBI had come up with the business responsibility reports, which they've added the sustainability factor to it, recently, and have made it mandatory. They started with making it a voluntary disclosure, and gradually, I like the government did with CSR, eventually made it compulsory, but earlier it was voluntary. I think they've done the same thing here. And starting this year, the top 1,000 listed entities are expected to make, besides financial disclosures, also their ESG disclosures. Now, the word ESG is so encompassing to my mind. When you read environment, social and governance, there is nothing that a company does that's outside of these three letters, right? It's so encompassing, it's so vast. So environment, we just spoke about. Of course, we add to that plastic waste management, add to that effluent waste management. The sludge that we use that comes out when we manage our effluent waste in the plants, which the outcome is slurry.
Yeah.
One of the options is go dump it into a landfill, right? But we don't do that. We have tie-ups with cement companies. Slurry is actually an input for them into their business in their cement operations. So it's like, what is our waste becomes their wealth. So you have to work in that manner to, this is a true model of sustainability, right? And where nothing goes waste, but it's being used. Now, the government came out with this scrappage policy, correct? And we've already tied up with our Toyota Kyushu. We already have a JV running with them only for scrapping cars. Mm-hmm. So that they not only the old ones that get out of Maruti Suzuki and are True Value and etc., whatever, becomes a feed into that, but also from all other sources that you can get. And once when we see that running very well, there is a plan to, we would look to take it to the rest of the parts of the country. Why not? That is also managing of waste very well, reusable, recyclable. What can be taken off, what can be scrapped, but scrapped appropriately so that it does not create a polluting environment, right? That is the whole crux of this. We've just set up the largest, perhaps portable solar energy portable stand. Wherever we have a S&D area, sales and dispatch area, where you will find thousands of cars which get ready to be shipped out. The area above that on poles, that's all done with solar, so it just generates energy. So we are trying our best. It doesn't even take up space. So it not only protects the cars from heat and dust and, hail and storm, but it also then adds to this piece. So, from every aspect, be it managing the green areas, which is allotted to you, how do you do that, keep them going? All of those are part of environmental management, and making sure that we remain not only a compliant company, but also a very mindful and sensitive to the environment concerns that we see going forward, and to be a kind of be on that bandwagon very well. On the governance side, I think, I can state very confidently that Maruti Suzuki is a very, very compliant company, and we ensure that corporate governance is right up there on the ladder, and make sure that we do things in the right way. We have a very, very robust a governance program, be it on the statutory laws and be at our own internal processes and policies, our complaint response plan, our code of business conduct, the way we set up policies and procedures, look after POSH, the whole gamut of things. I think some of them can be real good best practices. We also continue to benchmark ourselves from time to time to see if others are doing something better. What is it that we can add to our program to make that better? We are currently in one of those exercises right now, because we're trying to do this for the next, how do we sustain ourselves for the next 10 years? Right. Societal, of course, is all about, management of people related processes and policies, whether it's your Porsche Act, whether it is your policy of remuneration and nomination. We are a listed entity. We've got separate committees to look after that. Whether it is how do you manage your unions, how do you manage your employees, the remuneration you pay them, are you meeting the standards and the norms? All of that, your relationships, with your customers, with your stakeholders, with your business associates, with your workers who it's like a collective responsibility, and collective sharing is something that Maruti's always tried to, work. So I think we run a very large operation. So, the attempt and the intent is always to be on the right side of law, to look for areas and gaps and fix them, and ensure that we continue to benchmark and improve ourselves on all of these parameters, from time to time. And this year, at the end of this financial year, of course, we will be making our ESG disclosures as well.
That's great, Manjari. I think I quite like that point on one man's trash, another man's treasure, how you're actually connecting these things. That's really wonderful. Another important topic for the day is data privacy. With the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019 having been withdrawn by the government after 5 years of its wait, one can imagine the work that is going into bringing out a more comprehensive legislation in its scope and purpose. How are organizations such as yours managing and protecting data currently, and what do you expect coming from this bill going forward?
We were almost all set. I think current law is the IT Act, and there are, personal data is protected under the Act, and that's how to meet the requirements of the Act. All companies, including ours, I'm sure we are all looking at, have the processes and policies in place to manage that data. Now, the new data protection bill, which has just recently been withdrawn and, was in the offing for the last 4 years or so. And, every year we would tell ourselves it's coming, it's coming. This year, it was really more a certainty that it would come, given that it had got clearances from the standing committees and etc. and then passed by the Houses of Parliament. But I think there were some recommendations. That is exactly what I've heard from people close to the powers that be, and also what came out in the newspapers at that time in the media, that there were some recommendations. Now the government could tweak the law to that extent, of course, and bring and pass the bill, but that they felt that the recommendations were of the nature that it would completely disturb the entire sort of, the setup and the framework that they had created. So the best would be to appreciate and understand what those recommendations were, and then put it into a new draft altogether so that they're incorporated in the right manner, and there is less work to do. Sometimes tweaking always is more tedious than actually putting it across as a new legislation.
Yeah.
I think, I expect that to be out sooner than later, simply because data is mainstay now. Everything that we do is data driven. And I think the government is very cognizant of that. And this law is a total requirement from all stakeholder standpoint. There is a need to regulate that data. Otherwise, it can be quite, it can float in any direction. So I think the government is cognizant of that, and they will be bringing out a new bill. Talk is that it might come out by December, but going by the way things can sometimes turn out to be, I'm hoping a realistic timeline would be by the budget session. And once it does, I think the one of the big things that I think we see in everybody, the corporates more so, were of the view that it included in the most recent amendments that came out by the Standing Committee, it included both personal and non-personal data. Now, if you do include non-personal, then any and everything that you do is data, right? It is non-personal. If anything outside of the personal is non-personal. Mm. So just the humongousness of that data and that management of that, where all it resides. In fact, we had, as an organization, we've now just set up a new department on data protection, which falls within my scope. And we had already begun to talk to some consultants, etc., and do our internal exercise, we were already putting a framework in place, because it was going to be a year-long exercise just to get that up before, when we're expecting the law to come. Of course, it's, we'll start that exercise again now, given that, once the bill starts coming up. But it would have required us, right from how data comes in, how do you collect data, how do you store data, how do you manage the data, how do you disseminate the data, and how you destroy the data. It's a whole cycle, it's a whole value chain in that you really need, and the stringent laws that government was coming out with, that if they ask a query on data, your response time is within a few hours. How would you respond to the regulator if your data was not streamlined? So there was a requirement of putting a huge frameworks in place where data got collected in a certain manner, it was handled in a certain manner, there were transparent common repositories, so that when it needed to be retrieved, it had to be done quite immediately. It would have been a huge exercise, costing time, resources, money, all of that, and a lot of thinking to put that whole thing in place. So I think the idea was that, it's good to bring it step by step. It's the personal data is more important, because that's personal, sort of privacy comes into play there. So maybe it would be good to have that go at the first, and then, just to get our arms around that, and then take the next step forward to see how much of the non-personal, because the rules and regulations of managing the two could also be a little different, and it would be best that the two were sort of made separate. So I think that's something I think the government is looking at, and perhaps we might see things on those lines going forward, and that would also be something that we would look very kindly upon. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Manjari. And in fact, thank you so much for sharing all those valuable insights in the little time that we had today. I request Kaustubh to take forward the conversation with the question that he has.
Thank you, Ashima. Ms. Chaudhary, like you spoke your journey first as a litigator and then going in-house. So our audiences would like to know, how should lawyers wanting to go in-house chart their course of career?
It's quite simple in hindsight, I would say. I think you should, most in-house, most corporates like to hire people who have a minimum of 3 to 4 years of experience on their back, because simply, not because for any other reason, it's simply because we run a business and we run extremely tight schedules when everything, the business requirements are so many there, and oftentimes teams in corporates are very lean. So nobody has the time to teach a young person who walks in straight from college. So it is always advisable that, and it's good to be in a law firm, because the kind of grinding and grounding you get in a law firm, where you read any and everything that, across the board in terms of different laws, you really get to know the depth of it and the breadth of it, and what are the points, where do you look at the law points, how do you, work around those, because you are working for clients like us, right? So therefore you understand the other side. And then if you like, and if you think that the other side could be exciting and you want to make a shift, I suppose from about 3 to 4 years or 5 years of working in law firm, it's a great idea then at that point to move. Not too later than that, because then you get very set in the ways of a law firm functioning, I would say, and it makes it a little difficult then to make that switch a little later, because you find that whole culture, and you're so used to somebody telling you, give me a query, I'll work on it and get back to you. Now, that's not how it works in an in-house environment. In-house environment it's just not about the query, then you have to see how it impacts the organization. Will it work or will it not work? You just can't state just the law, but you have to ensure that it sort of gets applied within that transaction or the issue that the company is facing, and for a win-win situation. So you have to apply yourself a little more than just providing opinions. So and you need to have a commercial sort of spark in you. You need to feel comfortable in a commercial environment. Some people don't. They want to be purists and talk about law and opine that. Others like me, enjoy the whole atmosphere. And because you will have to double hat, you have to wear your legal hat, but on that superimposed is your commercial hat as well. So you really need to see when you're going to use which and what and how you're going to sometimes wear both, and then try and balance the two. So I would advise people to spend their initial 4 or 5 years in a law firm or doing litigation, and then if they think that they would be happier doing work in in-house, try and make inroads at that time. If you walk in too late, there might be adjustability issues, which at that stage you would be expected to really take on larger responsibilities and deliver quite quickly. And if you are unable to make those adjustments, which are sometimes very basic, then it can be a little bit of a difficulty, from that perspective.
Is there a secret sauce to your success?
Well, there is, I wouldn't call it a secret sauce to success, but I think these are things which are run quite common to anybody. And I don't know how successful I can call myself. I suppose it's a journey. You try and achieve certain milestones, and then there's still more to be achieved. So I hope it'll continue. But if I were to just, sort of encapsulate a few things that worked for me, was the passion. You really do need that passion. If you should be a lawyer if you really wish to be one. Otherwise, there's no point, right? The second is, have pride in what you do. And with pride is also about the confidence. Now, confidence will only come when you know your subject, right? So it all is sort of within that pride. There are many other nuances to it. Then I think you should have a lot of perseverance. Now, perseverance means never to give up and never say no attitude, and also a doggedness. Every time it's not going to go your way. Oftentimes it is not going to go your way. And life was never fair. But you got to just pick yourself up each day and tell yourself, tomorrow's another day, let's try it another way, it will work. You just have to keep doggedly at something to be able to get any place. And then with that comes a huge amount of patience. I think sometimes people get very, very edgy, and they want too many things too soon, which is not such a bad thing. But then you have to realize that there is a pace at which you can move forward. There are optimal years that you need to put into something to be able to achieve, to get to some place. And having patience, whether it is in your interpersonal relationships in office, whether it is with your stakeholders, whether it is with your teams per se, whether it is with your bosses. You see, everybody will be demanding. Everyone has their own personal challenges that sometimes get offloaded on you. You really do need to, take a little step back, sleep over it for a few hours, and if you have the luxury, perhaps for a day, and then address that issue afresh. You will realize that you will be far more balanced in your thinking when you address it after with a sense of patience, I think. And I was told by someone I know that if you read biographies or life histories of successful people, one of the most important and the secret sauce, like you mentioned, is patience. I think if you continue with these things, I do believe that, and have the ability, have the confidence. If you keep all of these things, do not shy away from taking up challenges. Oftentimes, we want to be in the comfort zone. It is in comfort zone, it's the trodden path. You will go somewhere, you'll be at an average to an above average kind of a professional. You will become better and you will exceed your own expectations. I assure you, if you look at challenges, face them head on, take it on. The bigger the challenge, the better is the outcomes also, and the better is the learning, and the better is your achievement and satisfaction. And like, Jack Welch, the late Jack Welch, who was the chairman of General Electric, used to say that, learn to become employable. You can never be guaranteed employability. That's never a permanent. But what you can gain for yourself is become employable, become highly employable. So continue to hone your skills all the time at any given level. Learning never should stop, because if it stops, then you're quite redundant as a professional. And so continue that, build up your employability. I said, there is always room to shine under this big sky and the big world. Everyone can have their moment, I'm sure.
Thank you, Manjari. We are grateful for this beautiful message and talk. Thank you for being on this episode today. And we really look forward to having more of these interesting conversations with you going ahead. Thank you to all our viewers who are tuned in today for this conversation. We wish everyone a great day ahead. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.